and welcome. You're tuning in to Unbreakable Hope with me, your host, Jessica Rose. This podcast is all about seeking the light. In each episode, we chat with someone who has either overcome the darkness or who is actively spreading light within their own community. So let's jump into today's episode. I'm excited to introduce today's guest, Shaunie. She has been through so much in her life and is doing so much for her community, who has been a survivor and thriver after domestic violence to now going on to competing for Mrs. Oregon America. So join me hearing her story, but also hearing some valuable tips on how you can support someone you know in a domestic violence relationship and how you can help grow from the dark. Thank you so much for coming on and being my guest today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
I'm going to let you introduce yourself to our audience.
My name's Shaunie Cousins, and I'm currently Mrs. Beaverton America. I'm competing for Mrs. Oregon America on May 10th. So that's my big thing right now that I've got going on. But aside from that, I am married to my amazing husband, Alex. We are still shy of 2 years married, but together we have an entire Brady bunch. We have 8 kids between the two of us that range from 8 to 23 years old. So huge spectrum of ages and lots of different personalities. Keeps us super busy. A lot of fun, just a lot of that beautiful chaos that comes along with blending families. I work in health and human services. I've been building a career there for going on, well, we're approaching 20 years. I'm in just kind of various arenas within that space. And I do a lot of volunteer work. I am currently a military resilience leader. They're called Key Supporters with my husband's Air Force Reserve unit. And so that's just one way for me to serve alongside him. Um, and it keeps me busy. And then on top of all of that, kids, work, pageant, supporting my husband through his things. I do some advocacy work for domestic violence and a whole host of other things. I have a platform called Rise Through Resilience that I do a lot of work with, and so that's really just kind of a very in a nutshell of Shaunie.
I love that so much. It reminds me of myself, like all the hats you wear and all the free time that you have. I mean, 8 kids alone. Bless you for all of that. And how exciting to be able to say, hey, I'm able to also still support my husband in his career with something that I love doing and having a platform and advocating. I'm sure your kids are really excited to see you grow and flourish and all that you've accomplished. What are some of the things that they're maybe excited for or their thoughts about you competing in pageants? Is it they want to do it too? Is it more like, oh, yuck, mom?
Well, so I competed all through my childhood up till I was 18 years old. And my dream was that I'd have daughters that would want to follow in my footsteps. I have 4 daughters, and my oldest did a couple of pageants when she was little, but it wasn't really her thing. I have a 15-year-old. I'm working on her really hard because I think it'd be really good for her. Maybe once she sees what it actually looks like, maybe she'll change her mind. She's on the fence. It's not a hard no yet, but we'll see. And then my youngest daughter, she's all in. She's ready. So I'm just kind of deciding what system I want to maybe start her off in, and we'll go from there. The reception about mom doing a pageant was actually a little more positive than I expected. It was just kind of like, oh, well, good for you, mom. Do you have to walk around on a stage in a swimming suit? Just kind of those important pieces of information. But overall, everyone's been really supportive, and I'm looking forward to being able to stand up there and, if nothing else, show my kids that it is okay to do really scary, hard things. And even if it's something that you started a really long time ago and you had to put it on hold, it is perfectly okay to come back to it 25 years later and finish what you started. So that's what I'm looking forward to, I think, the most. And, I think that it's going to be a really good time. I don't know if we'll have all 8 kids with us on pageant night, but we will have a handful of them at least. And then we'll also have a couple of other kids that I'm just kind of, the adoptive mom in their lives. So they'll be there too. So that is going to be really exciting.
It's always great to have a really good support system, especially when it's part of your support system that you're wanting to help encourage and grow. I've learned so much about pageants. I first got involved about a year ago this time. So I've learned in the amount of women I've been able to talk to how much growth there is. And there's so many misconceptions about pageants. And I just think it's just like I want to say any other sport or activity in a sense of you said one daughter is not really her thing. Maybe her thing's something else, but we can grow so much in team sports and individual sports and what we can grow and our confidence and our abilities. And I think that that's what's really great about pageantry. And when I'm speaking to these younger women who are teens or in their early 20s and just how well they're able to speak and all the amazing things they've accomplished in just their short amount of time on this earth is it's just so magical and beautiful. So I love that. And you're advocating obviously to be able to help support change because of experiences you've gone through in life. Would you like to dive in a little bit more to that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So you had told me before you are a survivor of domestic violence and abuse. What what helped you during that time and maybe what were some of the things that because I think it's important to talk about. I myself have gone through it and we all have our own barriers and we have our own reasons why I guess the big thing is why did it take you so long, right? Like that comes out a lot. But what were the things that kind of kept you there? But then what were ultimately the things that really helped support you? Because I think that's the bridge where people miss is that there's a very important reasons why we stay as long as we stay and the barriers that help us get to where we can get to flourish and thrive after.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely hear that question a lot. Why did it take 15 years? And the simplest answer that I can give is number one, it's not always so overt. You don't always know what's happening at the beginning. It can be a very slow build into a nightmare. And once you've realized it, you are a lot of times already isolated from your support system. You are just in a mental space where you've been completely broken down. And on top of all of that, I think for me, and at least for a long time, it was hope. Hope kept me there too, thinking, well, we'd love to think that they'll change. And it's also a little bit of shame too. I'm going to be honest there. Because in retrospect, the flags were all there. Everything that I experienced, I feel like looking back before I entered that, the marriage itself, I knew deep down what I was getting myself into. And I chose to, subconsciously, of course, chose to overlook all of it and take that leap anyway. And I paid for it, right? That was, you know, I can't call it an entirely huge mistake because I did end up with amazing kids out of the deal, but in terms of losing myself and reaching a point where I didn't know if I was going to be able to come back from all of it. I think those are the things that keep you there. You're ashamed. You're still hopeful. It's scary. You don't know what it's going to look like on the other side. And I know for me, a lot of mine was psychological and coercive control. And even though I held some cards because I ended up being the one who had to support the family. So, that ended up being my biggest tool and my biggest way out. But you don't know. You still don't know. You get threatened. Oh, I will do this. I will take your kids. I will take everything from you. Um, it's scary. So you stay and it's not always safe to exit when other people, are like, why don't you leave? And it took me 12 years before I was even willing to acknowledge what was happening or talk to anybody about it.
Mm. I think you covered it so well there, and just that little bit of a statement, and it kind of makes me think back to my experience, nowhere near as long as yours, um, and a lot of it, like we block out after we get through, like don't want to remember that, don't want to deal with it, don't want to acknowledge it. So mine was like a year to 2 years, and it ultimately ended in my brother came over to my apartment and was like, "We're leaving," and physically grabbed me, told him he needed to leave my apartment, grabbed me, put me in his car, went to his house. And I remember my sister-in-law was like, "Give me your phone." I was like, "Why?" And she's like, "Because he's going to text you and you're going to text him back. And you don't need that. You don't need to read what he says. You don't need to hear what he says." And then there was still another altercation after that where the police had to be called. So it's been
Yeah,
wild. Um, but when you're saying that, I was really thinking of like, yeah, I did. Like there were the red flags and the shame part. You're like, you're right. Because for me, I'm like, I'm a Marine. How did I get myself in this situation where I have somebody holding a gun to my head? Like,
right,
what happened to get me here? So then it's like you said, I should have seen the signs, I should have done something. But still that hope that there's better. There was good times. And I think
right.
that's what happens too, is it's almost like uh when things go down, then like here's something good to try and bring
Mhm.
you light and bring you hope to think things are going to get better, and then you stay more. But you also said that you're scared to leave but scared to stay, and a phrase that I've been overly using the past like week or two is the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. And I think that also just really makes me think of that, and it's just it's amazing how many of us have gone through this experience and we don't talk about it enough. It's one of the many taboo topics. Yet we're also kind of like our own worst supporters.
Yeah,
All right.
we enable ourselves. Yeah.
Yes. Or if we see someone else that we know, trying to figure out how we can help them. So there's someone that I know who's going through this right now, but we're trying to figure out how do we help somebody when they're in that state where they don't feel comfortable leaving yet. But we
Mhm.
also know that their partner is taking their phone and reading their messages, right? And they're not able to really speak freely. They can't really talk on the phone. So it's like, how are we getting to this person to make them safe and just support them until they're at the point where they're feeling comfortable to leave? Because that I think is the hardest thing when you've been there. Is that something you see when you're helping other people as well? Is like you see somebody in that situation and then you're trying to help and advocate for them, but almost not the lead a horse to water, because I don't feel like that's appropriate for this situation. I think it's like support until ready, or try and empower to lead that person to a better life.
Right. And I think sometimes the support that is needed the most is just somebody to talk to. And it does become a fine line because, if they're divulging things that are potentially going to make somebody unsafe, then you have to it's like that moral dilemma. What am I supposed to do? Do I take action and potentially make things worse? Because what I've learned is that it can be really hard to prosecute this kind of thing. And so there's a lot that goes into it. And sometimes we might mean well by thinking, well, I'm going to call and report this, or, I'm going to try to act on their behalf to get some help. And we might make that situation more unsafe for them. And so I think that a lot of times being the safe person, being there to listen, and something that I'm a fixer. So I have a really bad problem with when people come to me with things. I want to fix everything. I want to talk them through things and give them advice. And, I get reminded by my kids a lot that, Mom, I just want you to listen. I don't want you to fix it. I just want you to listen. And so, we have to do that for people. We have to be a sounding board for them as they process through, and trust that in most situations, and there are extreme cases where it does not end well, but knowing, coming from the inside, knowing that you have to be able to make that decision for when the time is right yourself. But if you know that there are people around you that support you, that helps make that decision easier.
Yeah, that's a really good point is having someone to listen and hear you and validate and not fix. I find that a lot in different aspects of my life is, I just need to get it out there. I just need to vent it out and somebody will be like, man, that sucks. And I see that a lot in all of the interventions I do for suicide is a lot of times it's like people just need their pain validated.
Yep.
And I don't know, it's like a societal thing. I know that it's typically thought to be more of a man thing. Like my husband's a total fixer. Or well,
Yeah,
not, but
mine too.
so it's like they just want to be like problem, solution, done, right?
Right.
But I know a lot of women are that way too. And I almost think when someone comes to me, like having to ask that question, like, hey, even when I'm like starting to get into the conversation, I'm like, can we pause for a second? I just want to make sure am I listening for you or are you wanting me to help you fix the solution?
Mhm.
And I think that's huge in communication, maybe even asking a person who is in a domestic relationship, asking them, is this something I'm here for you to confide in, but is this something you would like me to take action? How can I help you take a step? What are you comfortable with the actions? Because we're often we often get stuck in this intrusive like initiative is intrusive. And I tell people all the time, like, take initiative, especially in my experience with the caregiver to my husband. But then, like you're saying, there is some gray area there where that moral dilemma comes up is they may confide something, but maybe even just asking, like, hey, are you comfortable if I help you take action on this?
Right.
What would make you feel safe? Because it is difficult when people are in situations like this. You don't want to make the matters worse. So being able to still support that person and just by listening is a great, I want to say easy step. Let's be real. It's not easy. It's not easy to be a fixer and
Oh,
listen to somebody,
yeah.
especially someone that you care about or hearing somebody who's in pain. It's not easy to just sit back and not do anything.
Yep.
But this has really encouraged a lot of the work you've done to try and help other women really navigate these hard and difficult chapters in their life. What are some more of the things that you've done in that work in that field?
Well, right now, I just wrapped up a supply drive. I partnered with a local domestic violence shelter and got a couple of my Sash sisters together, and we did a drive for household supplies. They operate a couple of different housing environments, and that was their needs list at the time. And so we got together and got, paper towels and cleaning supplies and, things like that. And then we had a little paint party with partnered with a local organization and did just some fun, learning how to paint. None of us are artists, so it's always fun when you when you go to do something like that, you end up with like the nailed it version of a Picasso or whatever it is. But so that was fun. And then we took everything down to the shelter or to the office yesterday. And, I think that when we want to help, sometimes these small acts can really have a huge impact. I know that in those situations, you go from having no support to sometimes having like a lot, and you can fatigue out from having to tell your story to multiple strangers who are there to help, right? And so, even if you can't have that hands-on interaction or, you're not in the space with survivors helping them, sometimes being on the outside and doing, you know, small things like a supply drive can have a huge impact. And aside from that, I just do a lot of resource sharing. So throughout my career, a lot of what I've done has been making sure that people who are, they're maybe marginalized or underserved communities have the resources that they need to survive and thrive. And so a lot of what I do with my platform through, resilience education is resource sharing because a lot of times it might just be knowing that there is something out there that can help you that might be the game changer. And one of the things I emphasize too with the resource sharing is most of the time, when we think about community services and things like that, we're thinking very particular demographics, people who may be low income or, don't have access to other things that they need. But I think it's also really important to acknowledge that like domestic violence, it impacts, it does not discriminate whether you can be wealthy or, have need a job. Like it does not matter. It impacts all of us. And so it's really important for us to let people know that resources are, available regardless of where you fall in your socioeconomic status. And, that's kind of, I think that was kind of an epiphany. I kind of always knew that, but I spent most of my career working, on the other side of things. And the people that I helped typically needed a lot of support and a lot of resources. But then you forget sometimes that, their neighbor up the street who seems to have everything is maybe going through something horrible. And so we just kind of have to look through maybe a little bit different lens when we're talking about resources and advocacy work, is just to know that, we're not talking to only one pocket of people. We acknowledge that it's across the board and it impacts everybody.
That's a great point. It's just like, mental health conditions and addictions. And if we focus and we have our blinders on, we're missing so many people and making assumptions about people and their ability to access resources. So I love that. And you're really expanding across your state with some of these initiatives you're doing. What's some of the success that you've had really just growing this community that you're building?
Well, I created my platform to be about 85% digital because I want to be able to reach people all over the place. And, we have a pretty, I say we, it's a community. But so far, I've been able to engage with people from other countries. So, the UK, the Caribbean, and other states. So it's my goal obviously is to expand outside of Oregon. But right now it's about community building. And that's the other thing about resilience and support that I think we forget, is that the foundation for all of it is community and having a system and a support system. And so one of the things that I've always kind of had a knack for is that community building. And so right now it's just gathering people, getting the right people in place who have the resources to share. And I think that that is going to be kind of the next phase of the work that I'm doing. But I'm working on gathering resilient stories, people who are eager to share. It might be something big that they overcame and a big lesson, or it might be something small, but we grow through everything. And so I'm working on gathering stories. I'm working on a book. It's a ways out, but that's on the plan. And then I have resilience hubs, which are, if you like go into your doctor's office, for example, and there might be a resource table where people can access resource toolkits, and it's just information, self-assessment, and learning a little bit more about what resilience is, and that it's not just being able to survive through hard things. It's being able to take the things that we go through, those challenges, and learn from them and turn them into fuel to grow. And so I want people to have access to that information. So my idea of resilience hubs involves community spaces that people access every day, high traffic areas, and just having information available. And then there's going to be a digital component too, so that we can continue to expand globally. Resilience is something that everybody needs, right? And so, I have a big vision about what that looks like. But it's a process and it's going to take time. And so, the work that I'm doing locally and hopefully, expanding throughout the state and the world eventually land us where we want to be. And, resilience is just kind of one of those skills that people don't really think about as a skill. People think, oh, you're born resilient, and all it means is I'm just gonna, suck it up, grin and bear it, and get through this hard thing. But there's just so much more to it, and it really isn't something we're born with. It's really something that we have to build, but we can't build it if we don't know how. And so really it's education and resources again, and community, having a support system. That is going to be one of the biggest game changers for so many people, is just knowing that there is somebody out there who will help, be, a listening ear, or have something to offer that can help elevate them to the next point in their lives.
Yeah, that is amazing. We've done that in the veteran community and population I've been in. I worked on a national project helping communities across the US and territories building these groups to be able to form communities to support, to help people. And I love what you're saying is people do think like, oh, you're either born resilient or you're not. And no, it's like everything. Sure, there's like some genetic stuff, but there's also developed skills. You can develop the skill to play the guitar, right? You can develop the skill to become a runner, like different things like that. So I think we forget that. And I think that there's also this huge shift in dynamics in our societal and family culture after World War II. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it is a change that I think that we don't often talk about and recognize, that we went from there being a primary parent in the home raising the family to now we're more of a community. It takes a tribe,
Mhm.
right? But we kind of forget that it takes a tribe to also help build that resilience and help us get through things. And sometimes we get to a point where we always want better for our kids. And I feel like sometimes, depending on how you go about doing that, could be a detriment to them.
Yep.
If you make things too easy, we're not giving them the chance to fall and get back up and fall and get back up. So we still have to give opportunities and chances to learn resilient skills that maybe weren't learned in the home, in the community base that the person grew up in, or through experiences in life. We want them to have these opportunities because it is a skill that you can learn and develop. I think that's so amazing. I'm so excited to hear more about your community hubs and a look for your book when it does come out. This seems like it ties into another reason why you created Pageant Pathways too, is really helping to empower women to also be changes in their own community, right?
Yes, and Pageant Pathways it's kind of still in development, but I have an entire framework ready to go. But it is really about accessing sort of that transformational power that pageantry holds. So you talked earlier about conceptions about pageants, or the women who compete in pageants. And, you know, I think it's really important to give visibility to what it what is the contrary, because we aren't shallow. It's not all about outer beauty, and that sounds cliche, but it's true. But we have this problem, right, where the visibility around pageantry has been pretty negative over the last decade or so. And so we have to, as pageant women, get out into our communities and kind of show them that what they've seen on reality TV, or, they've heard in the media, is not necessarily the truth, like a lot of things. You can't believe everything that you read or everything that you see on TikTok. And so with Pageant Pathways, it's not only about building that visibility, helping to kind of bridge that gap, and help people understand what pageantry is and what it can do. But I want people to be able to access pageantry. I grew up in a rural area in northern Nevada, far, far away from everywhere. And so we had we did our thing. We competed. I did really well at state, and, did all the things growing up. But we were isolated. We were rural, and we didn't have the level of engagement that the girls in Vegas had. So you knew when it was time to go to state, you went to Vegas, and you were competing against people who had access to all the best dance training and, everything you can imagine, because it's Vegas. And, we were just kind of these forgotten places, but I want women all over to realize that, this is an opportunity that they can access, even though they don't live, I'm in Oregon. So when I talk about metro area, Portland or Salem, there are places all over Oregon with amazing women, and I just want them to know that there is an opportunity like this for them. And as women, a lot of times we're taught that we need to be selfless, especially once we've been married, kids. Our dreams are dead, right? We're not supposed to be pursuing things. We're supposed to be focused on raising our kids, making sure they have all the things. But it kind of like to go back to that, the oxygen mask on the plane. You got to put your own on first before you can help anybody else. And that's really true. Like, we as women need to build our own resilience. We need to come to a place where we understand that it's okay to put ourselves first sometimes, and sometimes it's even better. I would have to say, and maybe we'd have to ask my kids. Maybe they disagree, but I don't know. But me having this opportunity to, prioritize me and do something big for myself, I feel like it's helped me become a better mom. And yeah, my focus has been shifted a little bit on things that I'm working on, but that doesn't mean that my kids are going without, but that's kind of what people think, why are you 43 and doing a pageant? That's ridiculous, but for me, I'm reclaiming myself, and
Mm.
Shaunie in her full self is going to be so much more powerful and do so many more things for the world than Shaunie who, you know, lost herself and then decided to stay there. So that's really what I want to bring to women, is this idea that it doesn't matter where you're at in life, you can access opportunities that are going to enrich you. And pageantry isn't the only one, but it is one. And we don't realize, I forgot that there was pageants that married women could do. And when the opportunity came up, or I saw something on uh, Instagram, actually, I'm like, oh yeah, I could totally do this. This is what I want to do. And so if women don't know about it, they're going to miss out, and then we're going to miss out on them. And that's the other thing. If we have all these women just kind of hiding because they don't know that there's something for them, there's a platform that they can, do incredible things with. So we're missing out on what they have to offer too. And so I think it's really important to be able to connect that. We need to connect the women who want to or could benefit from it to the opportunity. And so that's what Pageant Pathways is really about.
That's amazing. It's you're making me think of like my mom, and growing up, it was three of us. Both my parents were active duty. My dad was practically in Saudi Arabia my whole life. So my mom was pretty much just a single mother taking care of the three of us. And every time I think and I look back, it's like, what's one thing I would have loved to seen my mom to take more time for herself.
Mhm.
But for my mom, because she grew up and she didn't have anything and she had to fight for everything, and she's gone through so much in her life, her thought process was, I want my kids to have all the opportunities I never had. So I would rather go without and let my kids have everything. Now that there was like a little bit of benefit, because a lot of what I saw with my mom was there's no stopping. You push through, you push through, you push through. And I think that like that seen resilience has helped me through some times in my life, but I also feel like having seen her do something for herself would have also been so powerful for me. And I don't think I could convince her, even if I paid for everything and bribed her, which the thought has crossed my mind now that we're chatting, is like getting her to compete in like the elite category, right? Just because it would be so much fun for me to see my mom do something, but I don't think it's something she would want to do.
Right. Yeah.
But like you, I found I'm in the petite system, and I found it on Instagram, and I I I didn't know, like I didn't know that there were pageants for married women. I thought I was too old. I had no clue. I found one pageant system that I was going to compete in, but a friend had signed up to, so she didn't want to compete against each other. She said, okay, like you go and then we'll figure it out. And then I thought, oh, I just don't really think that's for me. I feel like there should be something else. So when I saw the Instagram ad. I thought it was an Insta scam, but I was like, you know what? I want to try this. We're going to see what this is like. And now I'm just learning about how there's so many systems and there's so many opportunities. So I hope that through all of your advocacy work with what you're doing and people when they listen on the podcast, whether it's for their daughters or for themselves or maybe their wives, like they're listening, like there's a great opportunity for growth and for people to feel like they're their own individual. And that's something that really helped me is I'm a caregiver to my husband. And a lot of the times, like I lost my identity through that. I've been caring for him for 5 years. So trying to regain my identity and do something solidly for myself that wasn't centered around him,
Yeah.
something that was so it was hard last year. Like, let's be real. It was very hard. Last year was not a great year. That was the one of the many times my husband was supposed to die. So it was hard to just like get through anything. And
Yeah.
now this year, having a whole year with this title for Petite and learning so much more, I'm feeling a lot more energized about it, meeting so many amazing women like yourself. One thing, so we talked a little bit. I'm always curious how people find out about their systems and how they end up joining and getting involved. But I'm also kind of curious. You said you're from Nevada and now you live in Oregon and you have this just love for Oregon. What is it about Oregon? I've been there once. I've been to the Nike headquarters. I coached at a camp there. But other than that, I didn't really do any exploring. And I feel like you just have this deep love for Oregon. So tell me more about what that's about.
Do actually. So I grew up in Nevada, originally from Utah. I've lived in Indiana, I've lived in Michigan, and I spent the 10 years prior to coming to Oregon in Northwest Washington. So, I had grown to love the Pacific Northwest. Where I grew up, it's high desert, sagebrush, no water, just it has its own beauty, don't get me wrong. Love it there. Haven't been back in a really long time, but I loved living in Washington, and kind of how it transpired was we lost our home that we had in Washington, and this was before I left, and we had to come up with something. I was working. I worked for the state of Washington, so kind of this was post COVID, and really had to do something. And so
Mhm.
we all our bridges had been burned where we lived. We lived in this amazing community called Anacortes, just absolutely dreamy, little tiny island town, gateway to the San Juan Islands of Washington, just incredible place. But unfortunately, our bridges had been burned living there. And so it was time to run away, basically, sadly, for my kids, for the most part. I was heartbroken for them to have to leave. But we moved down to Vancouver, Washington, which is right across the river from Portland. And that's when things really got bad. And that's when that decision was finally made. My ex-husband went down to another area of Oregon in South Central Oregon, and that gave me the space I needed, at least to kind of make the separation. But here's where it's fun. So I decided, so there's a lot of history actually that kind of led up to our divorce, and I'm gonna be honest. One of the things that happened was 10 years into our marriage, my husband told me that he was gay.
Mhm.
But the expectation really what well, I thought, oh, that explains everything. Okay, be yourself, whatever, I don't even care. Maybe this is gonna fix the situation. Maybe you'll be all better now. You won't have all that, anger inside. And so I supported him through, this whole process of trying to discover who he was. And nothing changed. He was still the person that had me trapped in this horrific situation, and the person who really made my kids kind of, I mean, push them to the edge too. Let's be real with that. But so that had been a good 3 years lead up to finally the end, and the decision to finally be free. But I decided to get on a dating app. And the first date I went on was also the last date because that's how I met my husband. And he is an Oregon native, um, born and raised. He had left and he had done his thing, but came back to Oregon, and it just so happened that we met on Bumble of all places, and the rest is history. But really, where Oregon became a place in my heart was my ex came back before everything was done. And so I was trapped in a a city I didn't know. I had nobody, um, and then when I started dating my husband, he's over here. I wanted to get away so badly that I applied for an apartment over the river in Oregon. And so, really, what happened was Oregon became this refuge. It was where I got to take my kids and have a reset. We had a little apartment. It ended up being across the street, actually, from my husband. So it was very close. That helped because I didn't know anybody. Came here knowing nobody. But it really did. It became our refuge from everything that we had been experiencing. And so I have just love, this deep love for this place. And it's not like anything super groundbreaking happened. It just was the place that I came to reset my life for my kids. And it's also the place that raised my husband, who is an absolutely incredible person. And so I just feel like, even though I'm a transplant here, I just feel like I'm home. Like this is home more than any place has ever been. And so for me, I want to give back to this place that gave me so much, really gave me my life back. So that's where my love for Oregon came from.
Oh, I love that so much. Oh my goodness. Um, Also, if I end up on the contract and I'm in Oregon, it'll be later this fall. I'm definitely going to hit you up to
Yes,
find out.
please.
Let's meet up. Where are the good spots to go?
Yes.
Because it was literally like the last day I went to a park and I couldn't even tell you what park it was. And I just remember thinking like, wow, this is so beautiful, but you have such a beautiful tie, like an emotional tie to this. And all the amazing work you're doing to be able to make not just your own community, the whole state of Oregon, and with high, high hopes of becoming the Mrs. Oregon America, to then go on to really expand some of these amazing, beautiful things that you're doing nationwide. I'm just, I'm so touched. I'm so blessed that you came on and shared your story. And I know we're coming close on time. I want to make sure that we didn't miss anything important, or if you have some final thoughts that you want to share with our audience.
Yeah, I think we really covered a lot. I have a website, so I really like to share that. It's where I keep a lot of updates to what I'm doing. I have a pretty lighthearted blog that I've started there, and I will share in the meantime. I'll let you know. But I have started a blog in a different space that is about my survivor story. And so one of the things with the surviving piece is it can be really scary to start speaking out loud about it, especially when you have kids with the person, because it can cause a lot of extra problem. Because let's face it, abuse does not end when you get out of the marriage, especially when you have kids. It continues. I get all kinds of awful, I mean, it's smear campaign after smear campaign, and then, the texting and just the awful things. But then my kids become the proxy and they become the real targets of the abuse. And so you have to be really careful. But I also feel like my story is important to share, because it doesn't look the same for everybody. In my case, there was only a couple of physical situations at the very end. So most of it was invisible, but it was real. And so I started a blog called Surviving Mr. Hyde. And it is really about the experience of being married to somebody who was quite literally Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And so that's something I'm slowly starting to share in different spaces. That is just kind of the other piece about this is it is important to talk about and to share. And it can be scary and it can be unsafe sometimes. So, people have to find the ability and the time on their own when it's appropriate to start sharing. And so I'm kind of there, I've kind of gotten to the point where I don't care. I will take the verbal or the texting and whatever abuse, but I think it's important for people to know the truth and also to be able to recognize signs of, abuse that maybe we just kind of overlook. Like financial abuse doesn't always look like someone else controlling the money. Sometimes it actually looks like somebody refusing to work real jobs and refusing to engage in financial planning and then putting it all on you. And then when things don't go right, oh, I didn't have anything to do with that. I don't do the money, and then it's on you. And then the world blows up and it's your fault. So, things like that we don't always think about is just doesn't look the same for everybody. And that's kind of what I want people to understand and to see through my storytelling. And the other thing is keeping kids safe. I don't, my kids see my social media, they don't have to see my blogs or things like that if they're in a different space. They know the truth, they know their reality, they know what we went through and what we continue to go through. But I also think it's important to not continue to kind of drive nails and make them feel that constant extra stress and pain by having to hear me talk about the real experiences as well. So, just another thing to keep in mind. But other than that, I have really enjoyed getting to know you, and thank you so much for holding this space for people to come share the things that they're going through and their message of hope because we can go through really hard things, but those challenges don't have to define you. They can refine you. And that's something that I love to share with people is going through hard things. Even if there's things that you've done, that doesn't define you. What really helps is knowing that you are growing from your experiences.
Oh, so beautifully, beautifully said. And so many great takeaways in that last statement alone. I really sticking with that. Just because it's invisible doesn't mean it's not real. And I think that's huge for so many different things, not just domestic violence, but I appreciate your willingness to be vulnerable and open and tell your story and advocate for other women. And like you said, also respecting your kid's space. So I'll happily update the description once you get that blog going and what that looks like. So all the contact information and links will be below in the description.
Awesome.
And again, thank you so much for your time and being willing to share your story of unbreakable hope.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. If you found this episode inspiring, please share it with someone you never know who needs more light in their life. May this serve as a reminder that there's always darkness in the world. Do not let it consume you. Always seek the light. Please take a moment to do the good old subscribe, rate, and review. Your support means so much to me, and it helps me spread more light and love. Until next time, be kind, be loving, be human, and don't ever let anyone steal your hope.